Hello. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to make sure that everybody is set up and has what they need to be able to do to participate in this virtual gathering. So for those of you who have not been on this before, I'm going to ask you to do a couple things. So just to help you get oriented here. So one, I'm just going to ask everybody to put your video on mute if you haven't done so already, although you can certainly unmute it if you have a question that you want me to hear. You also have the option, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon if you move your cursor right to the bottom that says chat. And if you use that, you have the option, if you click on that right now, you have the option to send a message either to everyone here on the call or to just send it to specific people. If someone is saying something that you would maybe just like to give them a little bit of support privately, or if you have a question or a comment that you want to share with me privately, then you can do that just by using your chat feature there. I am going to share some time at the end of this, towards the end of this, to take care of any of the questions that people might have who are on the call today. But I also have a whole big list of ones that were sent in ahead of time, but I'm definitely going to make sure that people who are here today get what they need. So the other thing that I want you to do is just send me a message and let me know that you can hear me okay. So use your chat feature for that. You also have the option to have your video on or off, and that part is totally up to you. So sometimes it's nice in these kind of spaces if people do have the video on, because that allows us to get to know each other a little bit, and I have the benefit of being able to, thank you. I have the benefit of being able to know how what I'm saying is fitting for you, and if we need to spend a little bit more time on something or not. But you absolutely are completely welcome just to leave it like this. Perfect, thank you. So I want to spend the next, it's going to be about an hour and a half or so, and I'm really wanting to make sure that this time feels as nourishing and as useful for you as possible. So to help us do that, I want you to take a moment now to do anything that you need to do that's going to allow you to be more comfortable here. So whether that's cozying into your space a little bit more, going and getting a glass of water, I definitely want you to get your notebook and a pen and paper ready if you haven't done that yet. You might want to turn off your phone. So unless you absolutely need to be available to respond to something on kind of an emergency status, I'm inviting you to really give yourself this time and this space, and to really honor your decision to be in this space today. I know that for most of us, the way that we are programmed and kind of live is that we tend to always have that to-do list playing in the background, or that need to kind of share our attention around a few different places. But I want you to take a moment to really just acknowledge your reason for being here today, and to respect that as being important. So this is my first question for you today that I want you to think about. And you can private message me this if you like, or share it with the group, or just write it down in your notebook. What made you decide to come to this today? Take a moment just to kind of reflect on that. And feel free to message me that if you like. What made you decide to give yourself this time and this bit of care? Just do a little check-in. And what is going to make being here today feel like it's been a really good use of your precious energy right now to do this? Take a moment just to kind of check in. And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to share with you a little bit more about who I am for those of you who maybe aren't very familiar with me yet. So I'm April. You can see my little sidekick in the background. That's Sasha taking a nap on the sofa. And I'm a therapist by trade, so I'm also a bereaved mom. And I had been working in this field for about 10 years when I lost my little girl, Nora. And Nora was 1 day old when she passed away. It had been a healthy pregnancy. There was no known issues. Everything went fine with her delivery. Everything was normal. And she simply just stopped breathing in my arms. And that was my experience of motherhood. That was those 8 hours that I spent with her, was the only time that I got to have, other than when she was, in my belly. And so the reason why I offer these mini retreats and why I do the work that I do and why I have come to specialize in this work of supporting parents through the loss of a little one, or through infertility or pregnancy loss or infant loss, is because I definitely came to experience firsthand how absolutely devastating, and devastating is always an understatement. For me, it's always that challenge to try to find the words that sum it up adequately. But the absolute devastation and the isolation that really surrounds us after the loss of a baby. And even though this was the work that I do, and I thank you for your messages. Mm-hmm. So even though I had had spent my world and my career in the psychotherapy field and in the helping profession, I still was absolutely shocked to encounter how very challenging it was to find really good support. And I definitely knew that because this is work I do, I knew that I wanted to find good support, because I really thought of this as being stacking my team, that anything I could do to make this time in my life a little bit easier to get through, or a little bit more gentle, I definitely was going to do more of that, because I had seen from my clients enough to know that I was afraid of grief. I was afraid of the magnitude of it. I was afraid of how very big and real and threatening it was. And I knew that this experience in my life had the potential was going to change who I was. It just doesn't get a whole lot bigger than being a mom losing your baby. So because of my experience in recognizing, the magnitude of grief, I knew that it was important for me to get support. And that's when I went out and really was looking for other therapists or other support resources that could help me through this. And that's when I realized, as well as when I would start to turn to my friends and family for support, I really came to realize that this is a topic that no one wants to talk about, that this is a topic that very few people feel comfortable talking about or willing to venture into these conversations. And the absolute isolation of some of those moments and some of those days and weeks and months for me was excruciating, and all of that. And so feel free just to send me a private message if any of that resonates for you. If you have experienced that phenomenon that I'm talking about, of when it feels like, as you're going through this painfully worst experience of your lifetime, that it's almost like we expect people to be able to be moving closer to us, and instead what happens is they actually move farther away. Let me know if you can relate to that at all. And because of that, because I had experienced how big and life-changing and heartbreaking and devastating this is, I really felt compelled to help to bridge some of that distance for other parents, and to create spaces like these where people could come or watch the replay later and just know that they're not alone in this, even though it absolutely feels that way most of the time. And I really wanted to share um, something to make this for my own self, to make some of this feel like, yeah, it can almost feel like people are scared of me. I can feel how uncomfortable I make people feel now, right? And I think we've all been there, right? Because it's almost like this phenomenon. I remember saying one time, oh my God, it's like people think this is contagious. It's like people think that tragedy is contagious. And so there's this really strange phenomenon that when you expect people in your life to be coming closer, it often felt like people are taking a few steps away. And there was times when it felt like people I'd been with, friends with for years and years and years, instead of them coming and joining with me, it felt like I was watching them disappear over the horizon. And so there's so many layers of loss that we have to go through. That said, those experiences also made me more appreciative of the people in my life who were willing to walk across those coals and were willing to come and join with me in the darkness and the misery of all of this. It definitely made me see who those people were and to appreciate that more fully. But it also made me become fiercely committed to being that person for other people, for being that person who could really sit in the darkness, in those places where we have more questions than we have answers, where we have more pain than we have ointment to take care of that. And I really wanted to, um, mhm, yeah, yeah, there becomes all of these silent topics, right? All of these things that people are afraid to talk about to us, or these things that when they do talk to us about, they sometimes do that really with badly, right? With a lack of sensitivity for sure. So, and feel free just to let me know in the comments where you are from and what has been helping to get through so far. What's been helping you to get through so far? So, what I'm going to be guiding you through here is how to be making some of the unanswered questions and the fear and the uncertainty a little bit more bearable as you move through some of this. Obviously, we both know that what I share with you today is not going to take the pain of this away, right? We all know that that is just not a reality for a grieving mom. But what I am going to share with you today is going to help to make some of this a whole lot easier to get through and to take off at least one of the layers of the extra layers of pain and overwhelm that we have to deal with, so that moving through this becomes just a little bit easier to get through. So this is what I'm guiding you through today. So I want you to get your notebook and settle in. I got this long list of questions that were sent in to me when I put out this question to people of what do you need most right now? And one of these themes was dealing with the uncertainty and the absolute worry and fear of what if and what happens now. And I've certainly been there. So I've got about 3 or 4 ways that I'm going to share with you. And the first one is this. Right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And it is so different for everyone, right? And so as I share these things with you, I want you to really be just filtering this through what feels right for you, because I may offer lots of different suggestions or ideas for you to consider and think about. But at the end of the day, you know what parts of this hit home for you and what parts feel useful and what parts work in your world, right? And if we were doing these conversations on just a one-to-one basis, like I do with my clients, then I would be helping you to kind of sort some of that out so that we make sure that these ideas really are tailored to be as effective as possible in your world and with your reality. But in these conversations, what I'm sharing with you is just some general ideas and some ways that have been useful for me and some of the other women and couples that I've supported in getting through this. And the first one is surrender. And in many ways, this is the hardest one, right? This is the hardest one. This is this thing that we kind of hear about all the time in various kind of pop culture or kind of yoga psych worlds, where we say, you just need to surrender to this. But I would suggest that this is actually a much more practical, there goes Sasha. This is actually a much more practical strategy as opposed to an abstract concept. Because when we go through something like this, one of the things that I've often encountered when I've talked to different people, and I think this is really understandable and really common, we really, 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 really obviously want our situation to be different than what it is. And so what we do is we often engage in this pattern of trying to outrun the pain and the suffering. And what that looks like is a little bit different for everybody, but some of the ways that I've seen this play out is when distraction becomes your only coping strategy, right? When you just try to keep yourself so busy that you don't have to think about this or feel this or sit with this. And if we just kind of move into this place of trying to outrun, and the other way is outrun, but also outwork, right? That's the other thing that I see people do a lot of the time is we move into this place of if I can just nail all of this down, if I can just create enough plans and just work harder, then I'll be able to overcome this. And while I definitely respect, the need for some intentional action and the need for some intentional healing, I think what we're often getting into this is trying to find a sense of control back. And of course, we want a sense of control back. Everything that we have held to be precious and important and certain in our lives has just been blown into pieces. During those months of my pregnancy, I remember the hours, and let me know if you can relate to this, the hours that I spent Pinteresting what my approaches to parenting were going to look like, the Halloween costumes that the two of us were going to wear and that we were going to wear as a family, right? The fantasies and the planning and the daydreaming of what my life as my daughter's mother was going to look like. The amount of hours and time and energy that we do over the course of our lifetime, and certainly during the course of our pregnancy, is huge, right? We spend all of this time planning what our life is going to look like. And then in a moment, everything goes black. And there is emptiness and darkness. And we've got nothing, right? Yeah, it's that rabbit hole Pinterest, planning the nursery, right? I think we have all done that. Planning, 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 planning. And then suddenly, all those plans are gone. All those plans are taken. And we are left in this place that in many ways is the most difficult place to possibly be. We have lost our babies. We have lost our future. We have lost all of those pictures of what we thought our life was going to look like. And there's so many layers of awful in that. And this is the thing I think that makes it so hard sometimes for people on the outside to understand the absolute magnitude, the absolute depths, and the absolute duration of what it is that we go through when we lose a baby. Because this is not only that we lose our baby, we lose our lives, we lose ourselves, we lose our world. And this is the stuff that is hard to explain to someone who hasn't been there, right? And this is kind of where we get back those messages from people that say, shouldn't you be doing better by now? Or, it's been X amount of time. Shouldn't you be in a different place by now? And this is all essentially just the myths of people not really understanding all that it is that we lose. Because we lose ourselves. We lose our trust in the world. We lose our faith in whatever our faith or spirituality, religion, beliefs it is that once served us. We lose it all. And so this place of surrender is this place of just letting ourselves get that understanding that maybe we don't always get from the people around us, and that this is so much bigger than we are. This feels the way that it does because this is so much bigger than we are. And there's moments in that. There's a requirement and a necessity in that we give in. And one of the things that I talk about in that is moving to this place of allowing ourselves, encouraging ourselves to just be where we are, which is grieving, which is lost, which is in pain. And this is counterculture to a system that wants us to be better, right? To a community, to a circle of friends and family and colleagues and bosses who want us to just be our old selves again. And the reality is, the part that makes that impossible is that we know, and oftentimes we are the only ones who know, that that is not a realistic goal. That's impossible. I knew when I lost my daughter, I knew that this is the before and after moment in my life. Everything will now move between, my little dog's barking. Everything is now going to be divided between who I was before I lost Nora and who I was after. And that's a reality that we know, which is why our system tenses, which is why we get frustrated, which is why we struggle so much with this frustration of just wishing that we were better understood, because it's so hard to put our finger on that and to explain that to somebody who hasn't walked that path herself. My previous self is gone. She doesn't exist anymore. I'm somewhere new. Somewhere I never wanted to be. Somewhere that I am so glad that you don't understand, right? Because we wouldn't wish this on anybody. So let me know if that rings true. Send me just a message and let me know if that hits home for you at all. And so this idea of surrender is that we allow ourselves to treat this as with the respect and the tenderness and time that this deserves and demands. And so we allow ourselves to move into this place of not just trying to escape this or run from this or fix it or conquer it, or whatever that means, to being in it. Being in it. It's painful stuff, right? And this is hard. This is a terrifying place to be. And that's one of the things that makes it so tempting to either outwork this or outrun this or just stay in bed and give up, right? And just avoid it all and avoid the world. Is that the fear in that dark place is off the charts, right? The fear and uncertainty in that place is terrifying. And one of the things that I've heard from clients and the women I've spoken to over and over and over and over again is this phenomenon that as they're trying to figure out what their life looks like now, and if they're going to be able to parent again, or if they're going to be able to have more children, or if what it was exactly that caused them to lose their baby, as they're trying to kind of gather these grains of certainty and these answers to all of these questions. One of the things that I've often heard from women is that I'd almost rather just deal with the bad news. I'd rather get that call from the doctor or the coroner or whatever that is to say, yep, the next part of this worst nightmare is true. Yeah. And which is, this is your life now. You're not going to be able to have other children. This is your life now. And I've heard from women, I would rather just hear him say that or hear her say that than deal with this place and time when I don't know what my life is going to look like. Am I going to be able to parent? Am I going to be able to be a mother? Am I going to be able to move forward in some way or form with this? And let me know if anybody can relate to that at all. Feel free to just let me know privately. Because this is gruesome, right? It's gruesome and it's terrible. And the reality is, when we actually really look at this statement, I'd almost rather deal with the bad news or more bad news than not know. Part of this is because our brains are literally hardwired to want control and certainty. They literally are hardwired. This is part of how the species has survived, right? Certainty, order, structure, something concrete. So when we don't have that, when we don't have answers to questions like why or what now or what are my options at this point really, and how for sure is any of that really, then our system really moves into this whole other dimension of tailspin. Because our whole system, even from this neuroscience perspective, our system hates unanswered questions. And this is what we're forced to live through in so many ways when we've lost a baby. To this day, despite I think it went through 5 different committees, you can tell they kind of stopped paying too much attention in terms of what the outcomes were, because I wasn't optimistic that I was going to get any, which actually was my reality. To this day, while there is a couple of different theories on what made my daughter stop breathing, nobody knows for sure. And that is a very strange place to be. I'm filled with uncertainty that if I can have a child and keep them and take them home. Yes, not knowing is absolutely added pain. And so this is what I'm encouraging you and wanting to walk you through a little bit today, is really this extra layer of pain of not knowing. So what I want you to take in is part of this is just, it's not even us. It's just the way that our brains are programmed. We hate uncertainty, right? And so when we know that part of that is just bigger than us, then we can start to separate from that just a little bit. The other kind of piece of this, and cut ourselves a little bit of slack, right? Give ourselves a little bit of compassion, and that this agony of the unanswered questions is totally normal and totally inevitable. We want those answers with every cell in our body. We want to know how to move forward towards whatever our visions of parenting looks like with certainty. And yet, for most of us going through this, there's no such thing as certainty anymore. Because even when they say, yes, here's absolutely where it stands, here's the numbers, here's the risk factors, here's this, 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 and even if they give you an absolute flashing green light, it never feels certain again. Life does not feel certain again. And so what we're forced to do is really carry the fear alongside the grief with us as we move through our day and as we move through our life. But here's what I want you to do with it, because here's where I think this allows us to actually change our relationship to the fear and the uncertainty just a little bit. I want to get your pen and paper and just write out, what is the burning questions for you right now? Is that, am I ever going to be able to be happy again? Am I going to be able to be a mom? am I going to be able to be a mom to the number of kids that I wanted this family to have? Write it out. What are those questions? What are those worries? What are those worries that hit you when you are driving, or when it's 2 a.m. and you're trying to go to sleep and you can't, or whether you're just listening to the radio or trying to even stay focused on a conversation that you're having? What are those questions that seep in? Because write them down. What are those questions? What are those what ifs? Because here's what I want you to do with this. When we start to look at the what ifs, we can start to separate the fear from the facts. So when I hear women say things like, what if I can never be happy again? What if I can never experience happiness again in my life now that I've lost my child? One of the things that I would offer you to do is to start to separate the fear from the facts. And I know, here's a hard thing, right? I know that nothing is ever, ever, ever going to make not having your baby here with you okay, right? Nothing is ever going to make the loss of my daughter feel neutral or like it doesn't matter or I'm just over it, right? Because there's no such thing. There will always be this place in my life where I want her to be. But as we start to move through, giving ourselves just a little bit of room here to kind of dissect and deconstruct some of these questions that we hurl at ourselves and at our lives now, we can start to kind of catch those arrows of fear that are being launched at us. Because I believe that is just what grief and uncertainty does. It launches these arrows of fear. So when I hear people say, what if I will always feel broken? What if I will always feel broken now? I want you to just step back and notice that all your system is really doing is two things in that moment. It's saying the truth of that question, the essence of that question is I miss my child. I wanted my baby to be here with me. I want a child in the space that they're not in. That is all that question is really saying when we actually move it out into the daylight. I miss my child. What grief does is it takes that idea of saying I miss my child and it sharpens it into this arrow and it sends it into our hearts. What if I'm always going to feel broken? Which really just means in this moment, I'm missing my child. Does that make sense to people? That's all that question means. In this moment, I'm missing my child. The grief and the fear turns that into a future sentence. The grief and the fear turns that into an attack against us. Because that, ladies, is just what grief does. And if we don't start to throw its tricks out into the daylight, then these self-attacks can just feel like truth. These questions can just feel like they're real questions. Because as we start to move through this, even that question, what if I always feel broken, is really just two things. It's a statement that I want my child here. Of course you do. Of course I do. Right? And the other part is, the real question is, what is my life going to look like now? And the reality is, none of us have a crystal ball to know for sure. Which is why when your friends and family try to say reassuring things to you, it never actually feels reassuring, right? because our innocence is broken and we know that there's no guarantees. So here's what I want to remind you of. When you hear yourself saying things like, who am I now if I'm not my child's mother? What if I'm never going to be able to be happy again? What if I never get over this? What if I'm never okay? What I want you to notice is, one, you've already made it through the worst of this. You've already made it through the absolute most horrific part of this, which was losing your baby. The other piece is, I want you to remember these things that are hard to remember, which is that your worth and your identity is not dependent. Your happiness, even though it feels like it, is not actually dependent on whether or not you are parenting right now. And I know in a way that can be hard to hear, because when we're missing our babies and when we're wanting to be moms and when we're wanting to have bigger families, it doesn't get much bigger than those things, right? It doesn't get more important than those things to us. But I want you to just bring yourself back for a moment. And I want you to remember what you were doing when you were a kid. Bear with me for a minute here because this is important. I want you to bring yourself back to those moments when you felt most free and most alive and had the most fun as a kid. Was that at camp? Was that with your siblings? Was that with your friends? Were you writing songs? Were you painting pictures? Were you building forts? What were you doing in those moments of your younger days when you experienced the sensation of joy? What were you doing? And I want you to private message me and let me know what you were doing, because I need to know that you're taking this and you're moving through this, because this is going to help you a lot. Let me know. When you picture yourself at your younger self, what was it you loved to do? And when you first fell in love and met your current partner, if you're in a relationship, what did that time look like for you? Good work. What did that time of falling in love with your partner look like for you? What do you remember doing? What do you remember feeling? What do you remember that experience of falling in love and being in love with them look like? And I'm walking you through this because I want to just kind of help reprogram some of these places where grief is wreaking havoc on your thoughts and your mind and your memories. Because here's the thing. Well, you absolutely, wanted to and want to parent, right? If that's the case for you. Well, you absolutely are wanting that. The truth is that you have actually experienced the sensation of happiness before you even really realized that parenting was an option, right? Before you even fully realized or had any of those Pinterest images in your mind, you experienced the sensation of being happy and content and satisfied way before you filled up your vision board with the nursery and all of that stuff, all of that baby stuff. And it's not to say that it doesn't matter, but I want to be really careful here that grief is not just telling you all kinds of nightmare stories, because I absolutely believe that that is what grief does. Grief tells us scary, terrifying stories, like we are never going to be able to be happy again because we've lost our baby or because we're not parenting. And so why I'm bringing you back through some of this history is because I want you to be able to step back and notice the condition of your life is not only where happiness comes from. That is not only where this idea of feeling like your life matters or has value or has purpose comes from. You have experienced that in your life way outside of this circle here. Way outside of this circle here. And so this is important to kind of be able to hold up to the grief, because then what we're saying is really something different. Yes, I want to parent, if that's the truth for you, right? If that's your bottom line right now. Yes, I miss my child, of course. But that's not the same thing as my access to the experience of feeling life, feeling alive, feeling happy, feeling joy again. These intersect, absolutely. These intersect at the most primal, gut, heart-wrenching place. But these are not one thing. They're something that are intertwined. Grief wants to tell you they're one. Can never be happy again if it doesn't look like this. I can never be happy again because the way I pictured my life being happy now does not exist for me. These are the tricks of the mind that grief plays on us. And when we start to just zoom that lens back, we can start to call it out for what it is. This is just the story that grief is telling me. And as part of evidence of that, I want to just offer or share with you the facts of my life, which is that my life looks nothing like what I pictured during my 9 months of pregnancy. My life looks nothing like what I pictured. Hence, there's my little sidekick who is sleeping on the couch right now. I'm here spending this time with you lovely women, talking about how to survive the worst stuff of our lives. This is not what I imagined my life would look like. But I can also tell you that my life absolutely is still one that I enjoy and that I love and that feels meaningful and that I'm glad to be here for. And I never, ever would have imagined that was true when I was in the darkness, the darkest parts of my grief and losing my daughter. Those moments when I could not picture anything, any future context for my life that felt reassuring or comforting in any way. It was just this blank space of what I thought this was supposed to look like and of what I wanted this to look like. So I absolutely know how terrifying that is when all of that is taken from you and you're just left with that blank, empty space of what I thought should be here, but it's not. And this is terrifying stuff, right? It really is. I just want to take a minute to look through some of the comments here. There were times that I feared to laugh, as if I shouldn't laugh because I felt so much pain inside. Yes. And this is an excellent, thank you for sharing that. This is, I'm so glad you did because this is so common and so important. Let's look at what the fear is, even in these statements that we say to ourselves, because I think we've all been there. It is terrifying to even allow myself to laugh because what I have so much pain inside and because of what I feel like it means if I laugh. One of the things I've often heard from and I can relate to as well is that if I laugh, it feels like in this moment I'm betraying my child. It feels like in this moment I am leaving my little one behind because this is what it does, right? While the pain is excruciating, it's all that we have left of our little ones. And so when we look at this, right, of really how the fear plays out, this is all just about throwing the fear into the daylight so that you can tend to it and it doesn't just take over and sound like truth and real things. If I laugh and other people see me laughing, they might think I'm over this and they might think I don't care anymore, which is the farthest thing from the truth. Mhm. Just one thing. So this is this hard place, right? Where when it looks like it, what we're talking about is this fear of if I experience good things in my life, if I allow myself to experience the sensation of being alive again, if I allow myself to even experience the sensation of happiness or, God forbid, joy again, then maybe this somehow means I'm leaving my little one behind. And what I want you to know is that that's just not true. And whatever it is that you need to tell yourself to help make some of that a little bit easier, you need to do. Because for me, the thing I told myself was this. I told myself that I can honor my baby both with happiness as well as with my tears. I can honor her by actually allowing myself to return to life again, not despite her, but for her. And this is one of the ways, and it challenges me, right? To this day, there's hours, and I have to bring myself back, right? Because there's moments for me, even currently in my life, years later, where I realize that I am resisting feeling good, or I'm resisting allowing good things into my life because I'm continuing to carry this old grief and this old fear that it's not safe to experience good things, right? That will somehow be taken from me. So it's safer to just lean a little bit out, right? To just kind of dip one toe in there rather than lean into it fully. Because if I lean into it fully, this could change in a moment like it has before, and I will fall my face hard. And so what we're talking about is really the courage and the knowledge that we all here in this space, we have lived through the evidence and proof that nothing is certain, that there's no guarantees. And it doesn't matter if you're a good person, doesn't matter if you do all the right things, doesn't matter if you think you've got this kind of code figured out. I thought I had kind of things figured out a little bit before I lost my daughter. I thought I was doing the things I was supposed to do for the most part. And I thought that that meant that I would get to keep my baby. And it didn't. It didn't. So what we know and what we're living through is this loss of innocence. And this is one of the things that becomes so isolating, right? When people keep their distance from you and kind of move away, it's because our presence is evidence of the stuff that people don't want to look at, which is the fact that we're all vulnerable. The fact that things happen that are random and awful, and there's nothing we can do to really prevent it or change it, right? So I'm just wondering, that's right there. Yes. And so this decision of how do I bring another person into my life, knowing that in reality it might not be okay. How can we deal with this? So what I would say is, in this moment, we have to make a choice that there is only two things that exist. When we boil it all down, there is only ever two things that exist: love and fear. And if we move into this place of letting fear run the show, what does that look like for us? It means we stay home. It means we shut the blinds. It means we hide out from the world in whatever ways or form. It means we stay on the bench. It means that we don't take those risks because we don't want to put ourselves through that heartbreak again. But in doing that, we're already living the heartbreak again, right? That's the irony of that. All those efforts to keep ourselves safe, just keep ourselves out of joy, out of our lives, out of our relationships, out of our desires to parent or nurture or experience joy in whatever form that is for you. So the alternative is we try to just move forward with love and courage, which is to say, I don't have a crystal ball. I've seen behind the curtain. I know things can go very wrong, and there's oftentimes nothing I can do about that. But I want to be alive. I am still alive. And I need to carry my little one with me and to honor them by being here and by letting myself live. And so I think that it really is about making this decision. Am I going to live in fear, or am I going to try to live in love? And this is not a stagnant thing. We don't just get to make that decision and then have it ride out. I've shared openly, for me, I think one of the things that saved me was in my earlier days of the loss. Because of the work I do, I knew what the risks were. I knew how big the monster was I was facing. I knew I was at a crossroads in my life. And I remember making the decision that if this is how this stays for me, where I'm a shell of a person, I'm in the state where I'm not quite alive and I'm not quite dead. I actually kind of wish I was dead. I wish I wasn't here. I wish I was with my daughter. When I'm in this state, if I stay like this will be how my daughter will be remembered. This is how my daughter will be talked about in my circles of friends and family. April was fine until Nora happened. And I remember just feeling like there's so much I don't have control over here. But I can pick the direction I'm going to turn. I'm either going to stay small, hide from the world, and stay in this dark place where it feels like I'm kind of close to my daughter here, but this dark, horrible place, this emptiness of what my life used to be, should have been. Or I can say, I'm going to move forward with love. I'm going to try to carry her with me with love. And I did not have a clue at that time, to be totally honest, how I was going to do that. I only knew what the alternative was, and that wasn't something I was willing to put on my little girl. And this is something, right, that one-time decision is a decision I've had to circle back to about 1,000,001 times since then. Because this stuff is not stagnant. And the grief, as you already know, it's big and it stays and it changes us. So this decision of to continue to bring myself back to the love as many times as I need to, because that's a key piece of this, as many times as I need to, bring yourself back to the love. Am I doing this? Am I moving forward? Am I making this decision out of the fear of what could happen to me? Or from this place of love, and that I know what's calling me? I know what I want. And maybe that's another baby. Maybe that's being able to get out and go and have lunch with your friends. Maybe that's being able to receive, to fully receive the love or the support that your husband is trying to give to you, even when he's doing that badly or kind of missing the mark. Am I going to let myself receive some of that life, some of that love? Just reading some of the comments. Yeah. So I'm just going to read this out loud if I can. One of my friends, I had a big fear come up the other day. One of my close friends told me she was pregnant. And while I was incredibly happy for her, I got scared for her because I don't want to have to go through this. Do you have any tips for dealing with a fear like this? Yes. So my fear is, my thoughts for you are, you've seen behind the curtain. You can't not know what you know. And what you know is that life is not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. So I think it's, instead of trying to obliterate that fear and pretend like it doesn't exist or smooth over it with a whole lot of stuff, instead we just make room for it. You've seen behind the curtain. So what I often do, and that's one of the things that changes for me. So for instance, when I hear that someone's pregnant, I don't say, congratulations, you're going to have a baby. congratulations, you're going to be a great mom. I say congratulations on becoming a mom, because this is the present tense. None of us know what's going to happen next. I don't know if your baby is going to be born still, right? These are never the things I would say out loud, right? But these are the things that go off in my head. Because when I was pregnant, I absolutely thought that meant I was going to take my baby home for life, right? Forever. I was going to parent her through all the grades of her school and years and lifetime into her wedding day. That didn't happen. So what I move into, and this is what I would encourage you to think about in all areas and all the questions that every one of you are moving through. What is the bottom line truth in this moment? What is the facts? What is the part of this that is actually certain in this moment? The small grain. The small grain is not that everything is always going to be okay for your friend. Who knows? Right? Who knows what that's going to look like for her? And this might sound really dark and awful, but I think we're in a dark and awful place. I can say this to you guys. Who knows if her baby's going to be okay and come to term? Who knows if her husband or partner is going to continue to be a good guy, or whether he's going to hook up with a secretary? Who knows whether one of them is going to get sick or ill or injured in their lifetime? None of us know what's coming next. What we know for sure is that she just became a mom. She's a mom right now. So that's the part that I congratulate people on. Never the guarantee of what's next. And this is the big, my other big strategy or idea that I really want you guys to take with you. And I both hate this part and need this part, right, in my life. I both hate talking about this part because it seems so flimsy and frou-frou. And yet I need to talk about this part because it's a part that matters critically. Present moment awareness. This is not just yoga talk. This is not just, pop culture Zen talk. This is where we have control. I am not able to congratulate my friend on what 2 years from now is going to look like from her, or what 9 months is going to look like from her. I can only actually heartfelt in my authenticity and standing on a foundation of love, offering her my congratulations for what is in this moment. In this moment, she is a mom. In this moment, while part of me is sad for me and always will be, part of me is happy for her, her mom. Present moment is, I do not know, for the women of you that are talking about wanting to have another baby, we do not know whether that's going to work out. And I'm sorry to say that, as I know that's that awful part, right? That's in the back of our heads. None of us know for sure. But I know that desire, that compass that is saying that you are a parent and that you need to parent in your life is worth honoring and listening to. Can you honor that and untangle it from all of the fear to say, here's the love I know for sure. I know I've got a love to give, and I know I want to give that to a child, and I know I want to take care of them, and I know I want to experience parenting in my life. And yes, I am so freaking freaked out about that. But here's what I know for sure. We are separating the fear from the facts. Does that make sense? Are you with me on that? Let me know. Because if we live our life in this state of uncertainty, all we're really going to do is hide, and like an ostrich, we're going to put our head in the sand, and we're going to sit on the bench forever and ever and ever and ever and ever until we are dead. That's the bottom line of that. It's dark and awful, but true. The courageous thing is, I am terrified, and I'm going to move forward anyways. Move forward towards preparing my body for pregnancy again. Moving forward to preparing my relationship or my healing to be the relationship I want to be in, or the home I want to live in. It's not easy stuff, right? It doesn't get much bigger than this. It really doesn't. Which is why each one of you who are here today or who are listening to this, truly you have my absolute respect from the bottom of my heart. Because your act of even listening to this and being here today is a statement of moving into love and a little bit out of the fear. I don't know how fully I'm going to take care of this for the rest of my life, but I know I need to honor that part of me that says, I've got to find a way to carry this with me. And that's why you're here today. So thank you for being with me here today. And with my little sidekick who's still having a nap on the couch. So I'm just going to read the questions. Okay, so the question is, I've lost my baby, and I've recently found out that I'm expecting again. I'm terrified, and I'm still grieving the loss of my first baby. And I find it hard to bond with this baby that I don't know. So let's separate the fear from the facts, right? That fear is, what if this baby is taken from me too? The fact is that this new baby is here with you right now. She's on the call, or he's on the call, or hanging out with us present tense. None of us have a crystal ball to know what 4 months from now, 4 years from now, or 40 years from now is going to look like. But we know that right now, if you were to put your hand on your belly, you are not alone. Your baby is here with you now. And that's what we know for sure. All this other stuff, fear and grief and guilt. And that's something different. And this is stuff that you can take care of, right? And it comes back a little bit to that first thing I mentioned around surrender. This is going to feel different because it is different. This is going to be way more complicated because it is way more complicated. And none of that is on you. None of that has been your choice. None of that has been your making. This is the situation that you have been dropped into. So can you allow yourself a bit of room? Can you make room for your experience of being pregnant again and knowing that part of that is going to feel like shit? Can you make room for the experience of having this baby grow inside you, and that you're not always going to be able to connect to her right now? There's times when that fear is going to take over, because that's a human experience of that. There are moments when the fear is going to take over for all of us in whatever it is that we're moving into when we're trying to lean a little bit into life again. There's moments when that fear still comes for me. And here's the thing. We can do a lot of work to try to get better and better at not having the fear grip onto us and pull us out of where we want to be, right? Or where we need to be, as often as it does. But there's moments when it's still going to get us, because that's what fear and grief does. That's just what it does. I'm a therapist. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been doing this work for over a decade now. I live and breathe recovery and wellness and healing and these conversations. And there's moments when the fear hits me like a freight train and I'm just in it, because that is the human experience of it. There's times when it's just bigger than we are. So in some ways, I would say the goal becomes less about how do you prevent the fear as much right now, especially when you're in pregnancy again, and more about how do you take care of yourself after it hits? Do you beat yourself up for it? Do you criticize yourself for it? Do you move into the trap doors that release from under you, where you are now just in that pit of, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom, both to the baby I lost and to the baby who's here with me currently, because I got so disconnected from myself and my life and this baby here with me? Do you beat yourself up for that over and over and over? Or do you say, whew, I just got hit with one hell of a fear wave. That was so hard. this stuff is hard. And of course, I'm getting hit with that because the alternative is that you're expecting yourself to go through this as if you've never experienced any of this. It's not very realistic, right? And yet, when we look at the standards that we put on ourselves, which is often what the fear is, the standards, I'm just checking how we are for time. Then the standard becomes, I guess I should be acting or reacting or feeling nothing. I should just be experiencing all of this as if my loss of my baby had never happened. It's not realistic. And we wouldn't even want it that way, right? So this becomes about throwing the fear into the daylight so that you can look at what it is that it's saying. Throwing the grief into the daylight so we can look at what it's saying really, which in this case looks like it's saying, you shouldn't even be impacted. Do this better. Be more grateful. Focus on this new baby and just feel love for her and nothing else. And pretend like my other baby never existed, right? It doesn't work like that. So instead, it's messy, it's painful, and you're doing it one little bit at a time. So the question is, I've not managed to talk to my sister after my nephew was born. We live far away, so in some ways it's been easy to stay away. But I wonder if I actually should, is that just what I need to do to overcome my fear? Yeah. So, okay. So the question, if I'm understanding it right, is someone I care about has had another baby, right? And a family member. So this is a new family member of yours that's entered into the world as well. Talk about guilt-provoking, right? Talk about guilt-provoking. Huge. So I've been staying away because that feels a little bit like self-preservation and survival right now. But maybe I should just kind of do almost the exposure therapy thing, which is when you just make yourself do it, right? You just make yourself go and have contact with the baby and with the new mom. So what I would say is that that's an option. But again, I would say if you're going to do that, okay, so here's, I guess, what I would walk you through. The first thing is, I think we have to respect that coping strategy of avoidance, right? There was times when I avoided a lot of people. There was times when I remember one day I went through and I literally deleted everybody from my Facebook who had a baby in their profile pic. That was a lot of people. And some of those relationships have not actually recovered from that because that there was people who perceived that as a really mean and selfish thing to do. So we don't actually hang out anymore, right? Because if I have to explain that to you, then you're probably not going to get it anyways. But anyways, so I think we have to first acknowledge that that instinct to self-protect is normal. Because here's the thing, and this is what I think that other people don't really always understand. Going and visiting, and I know this is different for everybody, so feel free just to kind of, pick the parts out here that resonate for you. Most newborns look pretty much alike, right? So when we picture our baby, it's kind of like we picture every baby. Does that make sense? So for me, crossing paths with a newborn baby in the grocery store hit me the same as crossing paths with someone who looked exactly like my daughter. And when we kind of look at how this would play out in a different context, this is the equivalent of losing your husband and then running into his identical twin brother at the store, or having to go and visit and have coffee with his identical twin brother. This is not neutral, right? That's going to be one hell of a day. And this is the strange territory that we're in as mothers of lost babies and lost pregnancies every day of our lives, with the commercials that we see on the television, with the babies that we see in strollers on the street, and definitely with the children of our friends and family. We see what would have been our baby. We see their face. This happens to me still when I see little girls who would be the age that my daughter is aged from time to time. This used to happen to me, and sometimes still happens to me when I'm in a store and I see cute things that would be in her size, right? This is a reality of the life of a grieving mom. So, first off, I think we have to acknowledge that this is big and it's far from neutral, and it's not just about your nephew, right? This is so big. Secondly, I think, and it sounds like what you're doing, is we also have to step back and look at what are the relationships that you want to hang on to. Because maybe there are some of those that the distance is fine, right? It's fine, it's okay, whatever. And then there's relationships that you don't actually want to be distant from. In fact, those relationships become one more thing that grief takes from you. Not only do I lose my baby, but I've kind of lost my relationship with my nephew because of this grief. And that's hard. That's really painful and hard. And again, I would say, this is not what you're doing. This is what has been done to you. This is what's being done to you. The next piece of this, and your question touches on, what do you want to do with that now? What do you want to do with that now? What I'm hearing you say is, these people matter to me. I want a relationship with them. So acknowledge that. Acknowledge that truth. Acknowledge that bit of certainty. I want this connection. And then maybe you look at how you know those relationships best, and who can hear what, right? But if there's been a bit of a distance, maybe you start off with just a little bit of an acknowledgement, where you send them a card or you send them a message, and you just kind of really say something to the effect of, I get I've been distant. I've been keeping my distance, and it's not because of you. It's because this stuff has been so hard, and it makes me really sad, because I want to be able to be close to you and your kid, right? To my nephew. So, well, I'm hoping you can be a bit patient with me. I'm working on getting my way back over there. And then you kind of look at what would make that a little bit easier for you. Do you need to just start to reestablish contact with her in a way that isn't necessarily interacting with or about the baby right now? A friend of mine who we managed to stay close and connected. I lost my little girl, and she had her baby about 6 months later. And I think that one of the things, besides the fact that she's just a lovely girl and I'm grateful for her, one of the things was that I was able to say to her, I'm not really going to be able to be there, right? Like I wish I could, but I'm just not going to be able to be there. And she was able to hear that. And she was able to say, I don't really expect you to. But because there was that willingness on both sides, my 50 and her 50, we were able to kind of navigate our way through that time. So what that looked like for a while is that when we would talk, I was not the person that she would vent to about her lack of sleep, or how tired she was, or that the baby was fussy, or whatever that is. because I think in some ways, the woman who's lost her baby cannot really be the appropriate audience for how hard it is to be parenting a new baby, right? I would cut off my right arm to be able to have sleepless nights because of my baby, right? So I think she was able to be sensitive, and I was able to kind of let her know that. So look a little bit about what you would actually need that contact to look like, really, because you don't want to put yourself into a position of faking it, which means I sit here and I listen to the fact that you're tired, and I listen to the fact that, this baby's driving you crazy some days. And really in my mind, I am seething and I'm resentful, and I actually don't want to talk to you at all now, right? We have to kind of give ourselves a little bit of transparency and a little bit of authenticity. And that means kind of moving carefully through that. And I would say acknowledge the fact that clearly this is a relationship that you want to invest in. So start investing in that. And sometimes that looks like investing from a difference. So sometimes I can't be the person who is calling and listening to your baby cry in the background, right? Because maybe that's just too much. But maybe I can literally start to send things through the mail. I can start to send you, some cards. I can start to get creative about how I show you that you matter to me, because this is essentially what we're talking about. How do I show this person that they matter to me and that I want a relationship with them without getting hit by the train here, right? So maybe you start to do that in gentle ways to a difference. So I'm just checking through. Yeah, so one of the things that I see people talking about too, um, that I would say also touches on the idea of throwing the fear out into the daylight. If the truth for you is that you feel yourself really drawn to and really wanting to parent, right? Really wanting to be a mom, really wanting to have those experiences, let's just own it. Let's just own that as a fact that you know for sure. And commit, perhaps, to that. Where it starts to get wonky for people sometimes, and again, there's not a right answer here. These are just things to think about to help you maybe get a little bit more clear on where you stand and why. But I encourage you to kind of unravel what some of the fears are for you, so that you can tend to them and that they're not just making the decisions on your behalf. Because that's what happens when we don't actually throw the fear out into the daylight. They make the decisions on your behalf. So one of the things I see come up is people that say, I want to parent, and I only want to parent if this is my own child, right? If this is my own biological child. And there's no judgment around any of this. There's no right or wrong. And this is going to look very different for each person. But what I want to encourage you to do is, when we are getting into this place around conditions, here are the exact conditions that I need, that I require to live a happy and good life. I would say when we get in this place of conditions and we're making our happiness conditional, fear is running the show. So one of the things that I did was, and again, different things work for different people, but I remember it was my first Christmas after I lost Nora. I was also continuing to work at a crisis center during that time. And I was on the schedule to work over Christmas. So what that looks like is I'm the only staff on. I'm sitting in a small square office, and I'm to be available for the ER emergency room needs. and crisis phone calls. But it's quiet and nobody's really calling and nobody's really in the ER for me to see. And so what I'm actually doing is just sitting in the square box, missing my daughter. And because I'm at work, I'm in this weird place where I can't actually just do the processing of missing my daughter, right? I have to like compartmentalize it a little bit, even though I am sitting in this hell of missing my daughter over Christmas and being alone, right? Completely and utterly alone. And at that point, my husband had moved out. My family were kind of distancing, and because of the divorce, and I'm sitting in this room alone, grieving the loss of my daughter. And I remember just thinking, I have to look at what I know for sure. And so if the idea is here, I am so terrified in this moment that I'm never going to get to be a mom. I am so terrified in this moment that my life is going to be meaningless and broken because I'm never going to get to be a mom. Then I need to feed that fear some facts. So what I was able to do, because I'm just in this room with nothing to do but sit there, I started Googling and looking into adoption, right? And I started looking at really what my options are really. And I started kind of collecting some facts and some information around what my options really were. And it was that place of starting to look at my options to honor my need for parenting at that time that allowed me to kind of shift out of this fear and desperate, broken place to feeling a little bit more in control of what my life might look like moving forward. And one of the things that I hear for women a lot around the idea of adoption, for instance, and that's just what I need to do to not just feel so merged with the pain and the fear that my life was never going to be okay again because of this. I had to look at what this could possibly look like to not be broken in all of its forms, right? If my true bottom line need is I want a parent, how can I take care of my need to parent? All right, let's look at what all my options are really. And one of the things that I hear from women as we unravel this, and I'm not encouraging people to necessarily pursue adoption if that doesn't feel like the right thing for you and your soul, but I am encouraging you to first untangle what some of the fears might be that might be blocking any of the options or next steps in your life. So one of the things I hear from people when it comes to adoption is, what I want it to be my biological baby. And then I go to why, right? What is that about for you? What is it that makes that feel so important? And oftentimes as we untangle that, we land on fear. My fear is my baby, my child, will feel more loyalty for people he doesn't even know, his biological parents, than he will for me. My fear is that one day he will walk out and he will pursue relationships with his birth parents and leave me. My fear is he won't love me in the way that I want to be loved as his mom. He won't be bonded to me. And so when fear is making the decisions, we risk sitting on the bench of our lives and making our lives conditional on this recipe that we feel like is our only path to sanity and certainty and happiness. And I think that so much of the time that is just fear. Because when we actually untangle that, are those things true? Can you reality test is what we call it in the therapy world, those beliefs? Is it true that all kids who are adopted feel no ties to their actual parents? No, of course not. No, of course not. Is it actually true that if I have this child who is not biologically my own, I will love them less. I have family members, not my own child, but I have family members who are biologically not my own. And I love them the same way that I feel the same love for them that I feel for the ties that are blood versus not blood, right? So for me, not true. So start to allow yourself some room to throw this stuff into the daylight so that you can actually unpack it and untangle it. So I think that pretty much covers what I was wanting to share with you most today. I hope that feels helpful for you. Send me a message right now and let me know what stood out most to you today, and maybe even write it down in your journal. What are you taking with you? Because the next part of this is taking some small piece of this today and putting it into action. How can you start to question moving forward with love and not fear? And it's hard, right? This is a work in progress. Full disclosure, I believe it is always a work in progress. It certainly is for me. There's times when I'm really good at it and I'm on my game, and there's times when I face plant and I have to pick myself up and recommit to my promise to my daughter and recommit to what I believe to be true, right? Mm-hmm. So I thank you, ladies, so much for being here with me. This time is sacred to me. This time is a part of me, of what matters most to me in my life, which is I felt absolutely compelled to create more space for these conversations and to help prevent more people from feeling alone, because I definitely know the awfulness of that. So thank you for being here with me. It's a courageous act of love to even just show up here and give yourself this time and effort and intention. So how do you remind yourself, right? Even of this kind of little check-in, am I acting from this place of fear or love? What is the piece that I know to be absolute certain in this moment? Because this is the thing, that fear, right? Always the flip side of this coin. What is this fear telling me that I want? I had to look at this process even when I was making the decision to come to Rome. So I realized I was in this state where I was, obviously it's on no level comparative to losing a child, but this is kind of a lived experience of our lives. So I was in this state where I realized I was super stressed about whether I was going to have enough time to put everything into place that I needed to be able to make this move that happened on fairly short notice. And I was in this stress, and I had to stop and realize, what is the stress telling me? The stress is telling me how much I want to go. That's what the stress is telling me. The stories, right, that turns into in our head is a totally different thing. But this part that I know to be certain is that I definitely want to go. So then I will do whatever I need to do to take care of myself to make this happen, right? And then now I'm allowed and I'm able to start to address that from a position of power and action and intention, rather than from this tailspin of anxiety and stress. So how do you carry that with you? How do you check in? What are the parts of this? What do I know for sure? What is this fear telling me that I want? And how do I take care of that? For sure. So thank you so much for your comments, ladies. Thank you for being here. I am going to send the replay out so that you can watch this again if it feels useful for you to do so. And if you would like a little bit more support to meet with me one-to-one, if there's questions that you want to talk about more privately, or if it just feels like that would be really useful to have somebody in your corner who gets it, then I would be happy to do that with you. I definitely know the value of getting really good support. So love you guys. I'll see you next time. And if you want to connect with me, you can do that through my site, lovelostproject.com. or just email me directly. All right, take care of yourselves. Bye. Thank you.